Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now, today's video is all about a forgotten king, a Saxon king, Æthelwulf. Now, most people will have heard, if they know any Saxon or English history, of Alfred the Great. He stood against the Vikings. Some regard him as the saviour of England, the guy who burnt the cakes. But you've got to go back a generation before him. Æthelwulf, his father, pretty much sidelined, reduced by historians up until the 21st century. Æthelwulf was a warrior king. He made a great pilgrimage to Rome. He was a reformer, father of 5 sons. Without Æthelwulf, there would have been no Alfred the Great. So who was the man behind the legend of Alfred the Great? It's really interesting when you go back before the Norman invasion, 1066, and you see how Anglo-Saxon England was actually made up. It was not united. It was 7 separate kingdoms, all formed by migratory Germanic tribes. You had the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. The Angles, they ruled Mercia. They Mercian power. They really were a dominant power. And then you had Northumbria, Wessex, East Anglia, Essex, Sussex. That was the Saxons. And then Kent was the Jutes. You combine these all together, you have Anglo-Saxon England. England, it's a great word, isn't it? Land of the Angles. Angle-land. England. So at the time of Æthelwulf being the king, England was a country of 7 kingdoms, and he ruled Wessex and also oversaw the Jutes in Kent. So who was Æthelwulf? We know he was the son of Egbert, born at the beginning of the 9th century, raised in a deeply Christian court. We believe he was well educated, so that makes him literate, which was unusual for a nobleman in those days. He was pious, thoughtful, but he was no weakling. He was a warrior. He'd married Osber. They had 6 children, 5 sons and a daughter. The daughter's name was Æthelwulf. She became Queen of Mercia. So Æthelwulf, he succeeded to the throne of Wessex in 839. He ruled for around 19 years. Do you know, he was one of the earliest known hereditary successors to the crown of Wessex. Before then, it went to the most worthy male, not from father to son. Now, Æthelwulf, all of his 5 sons would rule. The eldest, Æthelstan, would rule Kent, and the others in turn would rule Wessex. The youngest son, Alfred, ruled for 28 years, first as the King of Wessex, and then the other half of his reign he was known as the King of the Anglo-Saxons. Alfred the Great, the legend was born. So our warrior king, Æthelwulf, led campaigns against the Viking invaders, the raiders. But he was defeated at the Battle of Carhampton in Somerset. Ironically, his father had also been defeated there in a previous time. But the Battle of Aclea in 851, this was a first major Anglo-Saxon victory over the Viking forces, over a large Viking force. I've actually got a quote about what happened there from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, but I've got to read it out. It's quite lengthy. 3,500 ships came into the mouth of the Thames and stormed Canterbury and London, and put flight Æthelwulf, king of Mercia, with his army, and then went south over the Thames into Surrey, and King Æthelwulf and his son Æthelbald, with the West Saxon army, fought against them at Aclea, and there made the greatest slaughter of a heathen raiding army that we have ever heard tell up to the present day, and there took the victory. This victory established Wessex as a kingdom that would fight back, and they managed to contain the Viking threat. They then formed an alliance with the Mercians and went against the Welsh and the Cornish. In those days, Cornwall was not part of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. In fact, on one map, it is known as West Wales. In 855, Æthelwulf decides to go on pilgrimage to Rome. This is a great undertaking, and you think, why would he do it? Is it the height of his power? Well, it's to give more prestige in the world for Wessex. And also it allows Æthelwulf to meet other kings and make alliances. Now, before Æthelwulf left Wessex, he gave 1/10 or the rights of 1/10 of his property away to the common people. This is called decimation. He also divides his kingdom. 2 of his sons will rule in his absence. Æthelbald will rule Wessex, and Æthelbert will rule Kent. Now, he also sent his 2 youngest sons ahead of him to Rome with envoys to pave the way. So Æthelred and Alfred would already be in Rome when Æthelwulf arrives. So the route taken by pilgrims going from England to Rome in those days was called the Via Francigena. Do you know, it was 1,100 miles, which they took in 80 stages, walking or riding 12 miles a day. It would take up to 3 months, but think about that journey. First of all, they've got to get to London, then on to Canterbury. Then they've got to get across the English Channel, which in those days was incredibly dangerous. Then stage by stage, they have to go all the way through France. And when they got to the Alps, they had the Bernard Pass, which was absolutely treacherous. And then, of course, once they get across the Alps, down into Italy and then on to Rome, which is halfway down the leg of Italy, don't forget. Now, one of the most important stops that Æthelwulf made on his journey down to Rome was he stayed with the Frankish king, Charles de Bald. He would stay with him on the way back, but first of all, Æthelwulf stayed in Rome for a year. He distributed gifts to the Pope and to the church. One of the most important was a gold crown that weighed 4 pounds. Imagine that, 4 pounds of gold, 1.8 kilograms. He also distributed gold amongst the clergy and silver amongst the people of Rome. The reason he did this was to show that the king of Wessex, Æthelwulf, was generous and he could afford it. They were wealthy. So he's building international prestige for Wessex. He's putting it literally on that world stage, isn't he? On his return journey, he once again stays with the king, the Frankish king, Charles de Bald. But he does more than stay. He marries the princess, the daughter of the king, Judith. So what we know is his wife, Ospa, had actually passed away. On his return to Wessex, Æthelwulf finds rebellion. His son Æthelbald refuses to give up his reign, and Æthelbald is actually supported by the Bishop of Sherborne and Eanwulf, a major earl at the time. Do you know both of those men were originally trusted advisors of Æthelwulf, so there's treachery here. But to avoid civil war, Æthelwulf divides the kingdom. He will take the eastern part of Wessex, and his son Æthelbald can rule the west, and Æthelbert remains with Kent. By dividing his kingdom, Æthelwulf maintained peace and stability. But do you know, if you look at the history books, Æthelwulf's reign is largely unappreciated up until the 21st century. It's hardly mentioned, actually. And yet Æthelwulf laid down the foundation for a learned, stable, Christian kingship of Wessex. He extended the Saxon reach right the way into the west country of England, down into Devon and Cornwall. He extended communications all the way through France, down across those Alps, down Italy, into Rome. In fact, he put Wessex on the international stage, didn't he? The prestige that he brought. It's quite wonderful. He died on the 13th of January, 858. He was buried in Staining, Sussex, but he was later exhumed and reburied in Winchester. Now, his son Æthelbald died 2 years later, and Æthelbert became king of Wessex and Kent. So he united those two kingdoms, and this is the thing about the Saxons, their kingdoms uniting. He lasted 5 years, dying in 865. So Æthelwulf's fourth son, Æthelred, it's very confusing, isn't it, reigned now for 6 years. But when he died, Æthelred's 2 sons were too young to rule. So Alfred, the youngest son of Æthelwulf, he takes over the reins. Alfred. That's Alfred the Great, isn't it? So next time you hear the name Alfred the Great, spare a thought for the man who made him, Æthelwulf. Æthelwulf was a king in his own right. Æthelwulf may not have statues or legends to his name, or even burnt cake stories, but without him, think about it, there would have been no great at all. Now, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was actually voted in by our Patreon members, but if you enjoyed it, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, why not have a look at joining our Patreon community? The link, it's in the description. Now, before I go any further, quick shout out to some of our Patreon members. As ever, I've written it down. Peter Valancourt, Daryl Pratt, and Luke Hall. These are great names. And hey guys, thanks a million. Bye for now.